Good afternoon and welcome to today's talk show on gender-based violence and matters arising, brought to you by El Bir Global Foundation in collaboration with Borno Radio Television. I am Zainab Muhammad Hassan, a student from El Kanemi College of Islamic Theology. Well, gender-based violence is a matter that affects all of us. The young, teenage, adults, and even the elderly are not left behind. A phenomenon deeply rooted in gender bias. With me today, our profounding guest, ready to enlighten, educate, and also clear every dust over this issue. With due respect, I introduce Muhammad Suleiman Dankoli from Maiduguri Capital School, Ibrahim Zanna Sunoma from Maiduguri Capital School, Ali Muhammad Abdurrahman from Los Sakiris College, Stephanie Cyril Eze from Maiduguri Capital School, and Jessica Sunusi Mushelia from Maiduguri Innovative School. You are all welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To hit the nail straight, I would like to start with Ali. Ali, can you tell us what gender-based violence is?
Well, before I go deep into my elucidation, let me amplify on the main term in the topic, which is gender and violence. When we talk of gender, gender is the classification of human beings into male and female in accordance to psychological, social differences that learn and taught deeply rooted in every culture and have wide variation both between and within culture. Gender determines the roles, responsibilities, opportunities, privileges, expectation, and limitation for both male and female. While violence, on the other hand, is the intentional use of physical force or power threatened against oneself or another person, a group, or a community, which will lead to killing, injuries, death. So, gender-based violence, which is popularly known as GBV, is an umbrella term perpetrated against persons with that is on socially ascribed differences between male and female. It's a violence directed by individual based on his or her biological sex or gender identity. It includes physical, social, emotional, and verbal abuse. Gender-based violence, GBV, can have an impact on anyone regardless of their geographical location or socio-economic backgrounds or gender identity. Thank you. That's all what I can say on gender-based violence.
Thank you, Ali. Jessica, what is gender-based violence?
Gender-based violence is a violence directed at an individual based on his or her biological sex or gender identity. Both women and men experience gender-based violence, but the majority of victims are women and girls. The surrounding where men are found masculating could be accepted by the society. This doesn't mean that all acts against women are gender-based violence. These include physical, sexual, verbal, emotional, or psychological deprivation, whether occurring in public or private lives.
Thank you so much. Ibrahim, what is your own contribution?
Gender-based violence, which happens to be one of the reigning category of violence in our community and the wild globe as well. Abbreviated as the name GBV, solely refers to a violence that is directed at an individual based on his or her biological sex or gender identity. But let me unclutter a basic misconception. Majority of people have this one-sided notion that gender-based violence is prone to always affect the females. That is a sheer misunderstanding. Gender-based violence affects both males and females, but it is more pronounced among the females. That's all I can say on gender-based violence.
Thank you, Ibrahim. Muhammad, what is your own contribution?
Gender-based violence is any act of gender-based violence that results in or is likely to result in physical, sexual, psychological harm or suffering to women. This includes threats of violence, coercion, arbitrary deprivation of liberty, whether occurring in public or in private. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Stephanie, what do you have to say with regards to this? Gender-based violence is a driven violence towards someone because of his or her biological sex. It includes physical, emotional, sexual, psychological abuse, threats, cautions, economical or educational deprivation, whether occurring in public places or in private lives. Thank you so much. Ibrahim Zannasnoma, what do you think are the causes of gender-based violence?
Having known the definition of gender-based violence, its causes are very apt and it revolves among both gender. The tradition and cultural practices of some communities paves way for the eruption of gender-based violence. Cultures that restrict women to certain opportunities, thereby making them feel not involved. In a society where there is high crime, violence, and conflict, let's take Nigeria for instance, where Boko Haram killed a high quantum of people. In fact, went forward to the abduction of Chibok girls. This infidelity has caused the girls abducted into hard labors, sexual harassment, depression. Indeed, this is a cause of gender-based violence.
Thank you, Ibrahim. Jessica, what do you think are those causes?
Causes of gender-based violence are war and conflict, hunger. Just as empowering women can help imitate hunger, food scarcity also leads to gender-based violence. Harmful gender norms, often empowered to empower women on gender-based violence. Regardless to its causes, gender-based violence are those violence which victims witness, especially children. Children witness or experience gender violence, have poor school performance, and are often low in the society, which a man come to.
Thank you, Jessica. Ali, what are the causes of gender-based violence?
Well, when we consider a societal or a community problem, it is sometimes hard to see or the symptoms of the real causes of the violence. It can be easier to deal with the real causes rather than the complex or far-reaching dynamics. But to get to the real change, we must address the underlying issues for conditions to improve. As we all believe that if we want to end gender-based violence, GBV, we must eliminate the root causes of it. Understanding the root causes of it, as it requires us to look beyond and see in front of what we can see and attempt to see the more complicated factors driving the problems. The factors include harmful gender norms. Gender stereotypes are often used to justify violence against men and women. Women often dictate that men are aggressive, dominant, and control of recessive, while women rely docile on men as providers. This norm can foster a culture abuse outright. And secondly, is objectification and degradation of both men and women in our media. On the third part is institutional influences, such as schools, religious, which are known to be the agent of socialization. Thank you.
Well, to sum it up, there are a lot of causes of gender-based violence in the society. Stephanie, I hope you believe there are consequences of gender-based violence to the society or anybody related to it, directly or indirectly. So, what are those consequences?
Well, in an individual level, gender-based violence can lead to psychological trauma. It can also have psychological, behavioral, and emotional and physical consequences on survivors. In many parts of the countries, we lack formal psychosocial and medical support for those victims of gender-based violence. And secondly, reproductive health. Women who have been
raped are at risk of unwanted pregnancy, HIV, and other sexually transmitted diseases. Mental health. Women who have also been raped are at risk of developing what we call PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And if untreated, it can escalate to a certain point that it causes depression. And some of the characters that are commonly seen are substance abuse, depression, and suicide. Thirdly, we see HIV. An estimated 16% of all HIV infections in women would have been prevented if women had not experienced violence by their partners. Men who have been raped are at risk of contracting HIV and are also at risk of drug abuse, alcohol abuse, and depression.
Thank you so much. Ibrahim, can you tell us more about the consequences of gender-based violence?
Gender-based violence affects everyone in our society. Some of its consequences are death, stigma, mental disorder, lack of peace of mind, the fear of no future ambition, vulnerable to be contagious with vista of diseases. That's all of my contribution on consequences of gender-based violence.
Thank you, Ibrahim. Ali, what is your own contribution?
Yes, on my own point of view, as we have aforementioned earlier, that gender-based violence lead to psychological abuse. So, immediate injuries it also lead to immediate injuries such as depression, anxiety, which was being mentioned by my colleague, that PTF, which is known as post-traumatic stress disorder. All these are the consequences of gender-based violence. And it also leads to forced social isolation and marginalization.
Thank you so much. Dankoli, as members of the society, preventing gender-based violence is one of our wishes. So how can we do so?
We can prevent gender-based violence by educating ourselves and others about gender-based violence. The first line of prevention is education. Secondly, we can prevent gender-based violence by using our voices on social medias. Using social media can help to connect to others outside our normal social circles. Thirdly, by sponsoring a woman survivor about war and conflict. Thank you, that's all I can say about preventing.
Thank you, Muhammad. Jessica, can you add more to what Muhammad said?
Education. Education is the first line of gender-based violence. By educating ourselves, we will improve in the society. Sponsoring a woman of war and conflict. That's all I have to say.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Prevention is better than cure, as it is said. But when faith overcomes will, how can we cleanse a society that is already into gender-based violence?
Well, 1, funding women's full participation in civil society. Women who are active in civil society can be highly effective in influencing the global, regional, and national treaties, agreements, and laws, exerting pressures to ensure their implementation. More money needs to flow in supporting women's full participation in civil society. Secondly, scaling up prevention efforts that addresses unequal gender power relation, and as the root cause of gender-based violence. Some programs have effectively structured participatory activities that guides the examination of gender norms and their relationship with violence and other harmful behaviors. They work with multiple stakeholders across the socio-ecological spectrum and across the multiple sectors. We need to do a better job in evaluating these programs to move them from small-scale points to larger-scale societal change programs. Thirdly, addressing the needs of child survivors
and including interventions of gender-based violence cycle. In shelters and services for women, it is common but also rare to find children of all ages in waiting room or safe houses. It is also common to find anyone working with these children who have experienced traumatic events. Sometimes they are victims, but most likely they are witnesses of victims of violence against their mothers. We lack trained professionals who will work with these children who have experienced gender-based violence, especially when their perpetrators are parents or other members of the family. Thirdly, or fourthly, bringing in gender-based violence clinical services to the lower level health facilities. The provision of gender-based violence clinical services has focused on one-stop shops as high-level facilities, such as hospitals. And such services do too little to gain key interventions, such as emergency contraceptions and HIV post-exposure prophylaxis. For faster access, we need to bring such services to the community, especially the rural areas.
Thank you so much. So a society that is already into gender-based violence can also be cleansed.
Yes.
Well, that's a laudable contribution, of course. Ali, what do you think are some of the rules of rehabilitation centers of gender-based violence victims?
Well, from my own perception, is to provide quality holistic rehabilitation services to the victim of sexual and domestic violence. That is, provision of quality counseling, including psychological rehabilitation, to traumatize men and women, to assist their recovery from the effects, to strengthen the institutional and organizational capacity of recessive to effectively and efficiently deliver, advocate for prevention of gender-based violence towards men, women, and their children, to increase awareness among members of community about gender-based violence. And on the final note is to create multi-religious support to the victims of gender-based violence.
Thank you so much, Ali. Ibrahim, what do you think are the roles of government with regards to this issue?
I will start by saying, what is government? Government are a group of people with the authority to govern a state or a country. We call on the local, federal, and state government that they should be very watchful of gender-based violence, strategize excellent ways to alleviate it. And we also call on the executive arm of government to implement laws made by the legislators. And the legislators should also make strict laws on gender-based violence, while the judiciary should make strict penalties on perpetrators of gender-based violence. We also call on the government at large that survivors and victims should be taken care of, while perpetrators should be dealt with according to the law. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Stephanie, what are the roles of traditional rulers in the society?
Well, when we say traditional rulers in Nigeria, we refer to the emir, the obas, the chiefs, the igwes, the lamidos, name them. These people of great charisma and prestige, they are held in high esteem by their subjects. Therefore, they can join hands with TV programs like this one to appeal to their subjects to stop gender-based violence. By doing so, they can make the society free of gender-based violence. More so, in our state, we have their Royal Highnesses, the Shehus, the Waziris, the Ajaz, the Lawans, and the Bulamas. These people are people of caliber, and they are held with honor by the members of the society and their followers. They can talk to their followers, they can talk to them against gender-based violence and condemn its happenings in the society. By doing this, we can get a gender-based free society.
Thank you, Stephanie. Ali, what do you think are the roles of religious leaders?
Well, the religious leaders plays a great role in terms of such kind of societal or community problems, because all the religious leaders are in great position to deal with such kind of problems. The religious community have to intensify their effort to see that they have eradicated GBV if possible. If it's not going to be eradicated, it should be reduced. And that is with the collaboration of governments to put mechanism in place to ensure the bringing of perpetrators of GBV to justice. Advocate for enactment and enforcement of laws against the perpetrators of GBV. And on the final note is that to create multi-religious center where all the victims of GBV can receive help or legal assistance.
Thank you so much, Muhammad. What are the roles of the media?
Roles of the media in preventing gender-based violence. By media, I mean both print and electronic media. Electronic media entails television, radio, our handsets, and so on and so forth. Programs like drama and discussions should be programs like drama and discussions should be geared at.
Thank you, Muhammad. Ibrahim, can you add more to what Muhammad said about the roles of the media?
I think the media should provide social platforms and advertisements on the need for the prevention of gender-based violence. Thank you.
Thank you so much. With this, we hope our viewers have understood what gender-based violence is, as said by my profounding guests, the causes of gender-based violence, the consequences and the harms it has over the society, that is, its effects, how to prevent gender-based violence, and how to cleanse a society that is already into gender-based violence. We hope that you also understood that we all have a role to play in the society in order to make it a better place. As it is said by my guests, Ali here said that the religious leaders have roles to play. Ibrahim said the government have roles to play, including the executive, legislative, and judicial arm of government. Muhammad here said the media has a bigger role to play, and also traditional rulers have a role to play. This program is brought to you by Elbir Global Foundation in collaboration with Borno Radio Television. I am Zainab Muhammad Hassan with my guests
Ali Muhammad Abdurrahman.